Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Zinclair Samoa. Joe is on assignment this morning. This gun salute that you're hearing right now and seeing on your screen is just one of the many tributes across the UK this morning honoring Britain's longest-serving monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, who was on the throne for more than 70 years, died at Balmoral Castle in Scotland yesterday at the age of 96. The Queen's reign lasted from the industrial age to the internet age, spanning generations and working with leaders from Winston Churchill and President Eisenhower to our current President Biden. This morning, we've learned President Biden will attend the Queen's funeral. The date has not yet been announced. Most recently, the Queen oversaw a transition of power in the United Kingdom, meeting with Britain's newest Prime Minister, Liz Truss, earlier this week, captured in a powerful photo. Truss addressed Parliament earlier this morning, paying tribute to the Queen.
She reinvented monarchy for the modern age. She was a champion of freedom and democracy around the world. She was dignified but not distant. She was willing to have fun, whether on a mission with 007 or having tea with Paddington Bear. She brought the monarchy into people's lives and into people's homes.
That was new Prime Minister Truss, and now a new era begins in Britain with the Queen's son ascending to the throne, becoming King Charles III.
Let's get straight to NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel, who's in Balmoral, Scotland, of course, again, where the Queen passed away. Richard, good morning. Thanks for being with us. So we just heard that gun salute in London, where many mourners are gathering to mark the death of the Queen. We've seen these massive crowds right outside Buckingham Palace. But tell us what the mood is like where you are right now in Scotland, the place where she ultimately passed away.
Not just the place where she passed away, she is still here at Balmoral, and people have been coming throughout the day. It is early afternoon now, and they have been laying flowers outside one of the main gates. They've been leaving notes behind, some of the notes thanking the Queen, thanking her for her service, thanking her for her calm, saying that her stability helped give them stability. And the same thing is happening at Buckingham Palace, and you're hearing those gun salutes. There have also been bells pealing, and we are going to see many, many different events over the course of the next 10 days. This is all part of what has been codenamed Operation London Bridge. That was the code name that people here used, that the police used, that the media used to know that the Queen had in fact passed away. When we first heard the news, I got a tip: London Bridge has fallen, and that was one of the code words to say, get ready. We are entering into this period of mourning, but also of intense activity, because there are two parallel tracks going on. One is the period of remembrance, of grieving, of honoring the late Queen and all that she did over her 70-year reign. But then there is the process of welcoming the new Queen, the new King, King Charles. King Charles immediately became the new monarch upon the Queen's death, even though the coronation ceremony might not take place for several months. But over the next 10 days, we're going to be seeing these two parallel tracks proceed at the same time, with several different events taking place here in Scotland. The Queen will leave Balmoral. She'll go to Edinburgh, then she'll be brought to London. She will go to Buckingham Palace. She will also go to Westminster, where she will lie in state. Then there'll be a procession where her coffin will be brought through the streets of London. You can imagine there'll be very many people coming out to line the streets to bid her goodbye. Then a state funeral with foreign dignitaries from around the world attending, including President Biden, and he will not be the only one. This might end up being one of the biggest state funerals that we have seen in recent decades, and then ultimately the burial alongside her late husband, Prince Philip, at Windsor Castle. And while this is all happening, there will be procedures to elevate King Charles and to make sure that he is recognized officially across the four nations of the United Kingdom as the new monarch.
And Richard, you mentioned the many events that are happening to honor Queen Elizabeth. We know Charles is expected to address the nation later today for the first time as monarch. You talked about it being called Operation London Bridge, and in a way he is bridging the nation into the next chapter. At 73, he's the oldest royal to assume the throne in Britain's history. How different do we expect his reign to be compared to that of his mother, Queen Elizabeth?
Well, he does have challenges. Today is not a day when many in this country are talking about the challenges. This is still a country in shock to a degree about what has happened. But most people that I've spoken to here in the UK, I live in London, do not feel the same way about Charles as they did about his mother, the late Queen. The late Queen, because she was in power for 70 years, because she has that connection back to World War II, she was beloved. She wasn't involved in politics. Many people remember what happened with Diana. They don't necessarily have the same sort of affection for then Prince Charles. We'll see if that changes with now that he is King Charles, and he will face challenges. One of the late Queen's main goals in her life was to make sure the monarchy stayed intact throughout periods of economic difficulty in this country, political unrest, several different wars, troubles with the IRA, yet she stayed above politics and tried to keep the monarchy intact despite challenges from the outside and more often within their own family. Now it will be up to King Charles to continue that same tradition, but it might not be as easy as starting off at a relatively advanced age and and trying to emerge from his mother's shadow. And that is, I think, why I was talking about there are these two parallel tracks. The next 10 days, half of the proceedings that we're going to see, more or less, will be to remember and honor the late Queen, and the other half will be to formally empower the new king. He already has all of the official powers, but he will be touring all of the four nations of the United Kingdom. Most people think of the UK as just one country, but it is in fact four different nations that are united under the government and under the crown. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and England. And King Charles will be going to each of them in what is mostly a rubber stamp ceremony, but to be officially recognized as the sovereign of the four different nations that comprise the United Kingdom.
Just some of those events we'll see, as you said, over the next 10 days with so much happening there. Richard Engel, thank you so much for helping kick us off this hour.
Now let's head to the British capital in London. Our senior international correspondent, Keir Simmons, is standing by outside Buckingham Palace, where mourners have been gathering to pay their respects today. And you were there yesterday as well. Keir?
That's right. And behind me, you can hear a 96-gun salute, one fire for every one of the Queen's 96 years ringing out across Buckingham Palace here, where you can see behind me the crowds. As Richard was saying, this is both a public ceremony, if you like, public pomp and pageantry, and of course a very private moment of grieving, in particular for one man, the man who we must now call King Charles, a man who is both grieving and must take on immediately the role of head of state.
Britain woke this morning without its Queen of 70 years, the beginning of a new era. This is the last public picture of her at the home where she died, her beloved Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The Queen smiling, appointing Britain's new Prime Minister just days before her death, determined to do her duty, her final act in a lifetime of service. Her children, son Charles, now King Charles, racing to be by her side. Grandson William, now next in line to the throne, driving his uncles, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, to say their last goodbyes. Prince Harry, appearing distraught, arriving just after his grandmother's death was announced. The royals' grief, private, while in public, on royal gates, a simple proclamation. Queen Elizabeth II died peacefully, and as flags across the country were lowered, a rainbow magically rising above Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. Crowds spontaneously singing the national anthem.
She's a person we've always looked up to. to my heart. It's just a sad day. Just a very, very sad day.
She's been a role model for so many people, so many people. Old-fashioned values, everything that we could ever have wanted and more besides.
Tributes from world leaders, including US President Joe Biden, arriving hour by hour. Queen Elizabeth, so much more than Britain's longest-serving monarch. A global icon.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Diplomat and, quite simply, a steady presence in people's lives. Born in 1926, the third grandchild of King George V, for 7 decades, Elizabeth would guide the nation and its monarchy through historic challenges.
My lords, pray be seated.
And all that while balancing motherhood and monarchy. 3 sons, a daughter, and a daughter-in-law, Diana, whose death rocked the royal family. She embraced many changes, including the marriage of her grandson, Prince William, to Kate Middleton, and later Prince Harry to the American actress Meghan Markle. She celebrated the birth of 12 great-grandchildren. But in 2021, she lost her cherished husband of 7 decades. Queen Elizabeth continued to inspire people around the world. Just this year, her Platinum Jubilee celebrated with a military parade. Joined by 3 future kings, Charles, William and George. Today, King Charles will lead his country in mourning. His sons, William and Harry, united in grief. Harry travelling back to London this morning. The loss of their much-loved grandmother, bringing them together. And remember that it was the Queen, their grandmother, who consoled them after the death of their mother at Balmoral Castle. How must they be feeling now to have been once again at Balmoral Castle, mourning the death of their grandmother?
Oh, an absence truly felt. Keir, thank you for that.
Yeah, such great context. Thanks, Keir. Now I want to bring in royal commentator Hilary Fordwich for more on the Queen and the royal family. Hilary, good morning. Thanks for joining us on this. So the news of the Queen's illness, I mean, we've heard some ups and downs for quite some time, but just, you know, from what we can gather about arrivals of the family and that kind of thing, it sort of seemed like it came suddenly, that it got so serious to the point where then, of course, she passed away. I mean, even Prince Harry, as we just heard in Keir's speech and Keir's piece and saw some images there, was unable to get to his grandmother before her passing, arrived, you know, of course, looking upset, which is understandable. How is her death impacting some members of the family that were closest to her? What do we know so far just about how they're reacting and handling this?
Well, good morning, ladies. Lots of questions there. With regard to Prince Harry, actually, if you think about it, let's look at the positive aspects here. It's quite fortuitous that he actually was in the UK. Of course, he's there so rarely. He made it just after her passing, but nevertheless, he was able to be there. So was Prince William. And so that no one looks at any controversy or tries to look into anything, neither the Duchess of Sussex nor the Duchess of Cambridge went. The only wife of one of her children that went was the Duchess of Wessex. That was why, because she was very close to the Queen and lived so close to her at Windsor. Now to some of your other questions, how the family is reacting. Of course, while the world mourns this, we all do. In fact, when you showed that lady earlier beginning to cry, began to bring tears again to mine. But don't forget, this is a family. And one of the things I think that is the most unique is how many people across the world have not only met her, but have had a personal experience. Of course, President Biden had met her. But look, of course, actually, really an interesting tidbit, the only time in history that a monarch and a prime minister had the first name. But 2 days ago, there she was doing her duty. How many people have you ever met or known, or does the world know, that are 96 years old, like your current photograph, were doing their duty until 2 days before their passing? So I think all of us feel this connection. Why? Because try to find someone who does not admire the dedication to duty. And I'd like to quote President Obama in this moment, that he totally talked about the warm response and warm reception she gave, and the generosity of spirit to both he and Michelle Obama, who made the mistake of putting her arm around the Queen, and the Queen did not shudder. She embraced that moment. And I think that's what it was, a generosity of spirit and a dedication to duty that her family and the world, and importantly, members of the Commonwealth, as well as here in the United States, are mourning.
And Hillary, you're talking about how the Queen was a uniting force in the country. We're seeing how she's being honored right now through that gun salute. And it seems that she was often a uniting force in the family, which has had its fair share of tension. Prince William and Harry have talked about their difficult relationship. So what could we expect to see from them in the coming days?
Oh, let's hope. Well, I don't know. Nobody can predict exactly what we're going to see. I will say that Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge, remember, she was the uniting force after Prince Philip's funeral. That was just last year, in April of last year. Remember, you're showing the photograph now, the clip. She brought them together. I'm hoping that she will be a great unifying force because the Queen was about forgiveness. Important to note, the Queen had offered yet another olive branch to Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, shown here, and his wife. Their children, her great-grandchildren, were invited up to Balmoral, as all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren were. So I think hopefully they will embrace that spirit of the olive branch. Let's hope that the sons would get together. Certainly the late Princess Diana, the former Princess of Wales, she always wanted them to be close. She said that Prince Harry's duty was to be supportive to her, his brother. Those were her important words, but she wanted the brothers to be united. Let's hope they embrace her spirit and the Queen's at this time.
Important insights there. Hillary Fordwich, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate your context there. And what you're actually looking at right now is a live picture. That's, of course, a gate at Buckingham Palace with the crowds outside as people across the UK continue to mourn and gather there as they celebrate the life of Queen Elizabeth II. And here in the States, tributes are pouring in from millions of Americans as well. This was the Empire State Building just last night. We'll show you, lit up in purple in her honor. And at the White House and all federal buildings, flags remain half-mast until the Queen's state funeral. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker joins us now from the White House with a close look at the Queen's very special relationship with the U.S., including 13 sitting presidents across her time. Kristen, good morning.
Hi, Savannah. Good morning to you. The Queen's death, as you say, is being felt across the U.S. Here in Washington, President Biden saying she helped make our relationship special. A bond forged in those meetings with 13 sitting presidents and an American audience who adored her.
She belonged to Britain, but America is mourning too. Queen Elizabeth's remarkable reign spanned nearly one-third the life of this nation.
This just seemed like such a significant moment, the passing of this woman who's been kind of the stalwart figure in the back of our minds for the past 70 years.
President Biden saying she was more than a monarch. She defined an era and paying his respects at the British Embassy in Washington. The tributes also pouring in from presidents past, including Donald Trump saying what a grand and beautiful lady she was. There was nobody like her. Former President Obama, we were struck by her warmth, the way she put people at ease. And former President George W. Bush, she set the standard for steady and dedicated service. Personal remembrances born out of relationships forged over the years, meeting every U.S. president except Lyndon Johnson, dating back to Harry Truman, whom she visited as a 25-year-old princess, then representing her father, the king, only to return to the White House as a queen in 1957.
I also want to say how much I appreciate the warmth and friendliness of your reception.
Visits punctuated by pomp and pageantry, and she appeared to enjoy America's pastimes, watching a baseball game with the first President Bush, and turning the Kentucky Derby into a royal affair during the second Bush presidency, often at the center of powerful moments. That famous dance with President Ford at the White House. Becoming the first British monarch to address Congress, sharing her love of horses with President Reagan, and showing her support after 9/11, ordering the British troops to play America's national anthem. And while her last trip to the U.S. was in 2007, every president since has visited the palace. Two countries now bonded in grief for a monarch, a matriarch, Her Majesty.
Now, President Biden had met the Queen twice, once as a senator and once last year as president, when he said her grace reminded him of his mother. We do expect the president to attend her funeral. Guys, back to you.
All right, Kristen Welker, thank you so much.
And now we're going to look at some international headlines and see how the international community is marking Queen Elizabeth's passing.
Yeah, NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us now from Rome with reaction from around the world. Hey, Claudio, good morning.
Good morning. Well, let me start from here, from Rome. We are near the Vatican, and of course, not many people know that Queen Elizabeth was one of the very few world leaders, if not the only world leader, who met with 5 different popes throughout her life, 1 as princess and 4 as queen. And of course, among them was the ruling Pope, Pope Francis, who last night sent a telegram that read, "I willingly join all who mourn her loss in praying for the late Queen's eternal rest and in paying tribute to her life of unstinting service to the good of the nation and the Commonwealth, her example of devotion to duty, her steadfast witness of faith in Jesus Christ, and her firm hope in his promises." And apart from the outpouring of condolences from leaders from around the world, well, cities and countries have also paid their tributes in very special ways. Let's start in Paris, for instance, where the lights of the Eiffel Tower went dark overnight in tribute to Queen Elizabeth. Paris has a special, if sad, connection to the royal family. Some passers-by posed above the underpass where Princess Diana died in a car accident in 1997 to remember both her and the Queen. And if the Eiffel Tower in Paris went dark, the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro was instead lit up in honor of the Queen with the colors of the United Kingdom flag. The statue was lit with white, blue and red colors, and President Jair Bolsonaro declared 3 days of mourning in Brazil. And let's end this tour of tributes pouring from around the world in New Zealand, where trainees in the country's defense force performed a haka in honor of the Queen at the War Memorial. Now, the haka is a ceremonial dance in Maori culture that you may have seen at the beginning of rugby games. It's known as a war dance, but also it is done and performed at funeral. Back to you.
Well, Claudio, thank you so much. Just incredible to see how much this is being felt across the whole world. She had just such an impact, and we appreciate that. Now, we're, of course, following all the latest on Queen Elizabeth's death all morning.
That's right, and it includes a look back at the challenges she's faced as monarch, from wars to her children's divorces to Princess Diana's death. You're watching NBC News Now.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth. Right now, we're going to take a look at her global impact as a leader and the family turmoil that went on behind the scenes. For more on that, NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now from London with a look at really a life that so many of us know about, but I'm not sure how much we really kind of think about how much she dealt with as the Queen during her time and had to put on this brave face for a whole country. Hey, Molly, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, that's right. This brave face, this stable face, she was the constant. We heard so often yesterday people invoking kind of that she was the grandmother of the nation. People felt like she was part of them. People felt this ownership, like she was kind of part of their own family. But above all else, it was duty and public service. Take a look.
Queen Elizabeth II taking on the challenge of her life at just 25 years old when she was crowned after the death of her father, King George, in 1953. Elizabeth was not originally raised to be queen, but she always had a close relationship with the British people, speaking to them during the London Blitz as princess.
For God will care for us and give us victory and peace.
After taking the throne for 70 years, she balanced the public duties of her office, becoming the most widely traveled monarch in history with the private roles of mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, speaking directly to her subjects in a Christmas address every year.
But now, at least for a few minutes, I welcome you to the peace of my own home.
During her reign, 15 British prime ministers served in office, and she met 14 U.S. presidents. Through turbulent periods of war and economic crisis, she stayed out of the political fray, but she embraced her role as head of state, meeting weekly with prime ministers, seeking to project stability on her visits to Commonwealth states after the decline of the British Empire, and gestures of peace, becoming the first British monarch in 100 years to visit the Republic of Ireland after years of violence. More recently, she navigated the turbulent waters of the Brexit vote to leave the European Union and later the COVID-19 pandemic. But her public leadership was at times overshadowed by the royal family's own personal upheavals. The tragic death of Princess Diana in 1997 rocked the family and the world. many criticizing the Queen for waiting days to publicly address Diana's death.
I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death.
In later years, some more family strife. Her son, Prince Andrew, facing accusations of sexual misconduct, which he denies, and disputes between Prince Harry and the family, though she stayed close to all of her grandchildren. And perhaps the hardest loss to bear came just last year with the death of her husband of over 7 decades. The black-clad Queen seen grieving Prince Philip alone. But this year, the family honored her, gathering to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, marking 70 years on the throne, 3 future kings flanking the monarch. The Queen carried on until the very end, meeting with incoming Conservative Prime Minister Liz Truss just 2 days before her death.
Working until the very end, which you guys was just so her. I just want to bring you up to date about the context, kind of what is happening right now. We believe that Camilla and King Charles III are about to land in London. He will then go to Buckingham Palace. Later today, we understand that he will have his first meeting with new Prime Minister Liz Truss, and then he will address the nation in a previously recorded address at 6 p.m. Local time here. That's 1 p.m. Eastern, his first as monarch. Zincle and Savannah.
All right, Molly Hunter, thank you so much. I mean, just incredible to have that look back. We appreciate it.
And all this morning, we've been covering the world's reaction to the death of Britain's longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, and the accession to the throne of her son, King Charles III. NBC News senior national correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now from outside Buckingham Palace in London. Keir?
Well, Sinclair, as Molly was saying, that flight with the new king and the Queen consort expected to land here in London any moment now. We are following it, and what must King Charles be thinking as he heads to London to begin his duties even while he is grieving his mother. As Molly mentioned, we expect an address to the nation later today as he tries to first do what he was born to do whilst at the same time still mourning the death of his mom.
Britain woke this morning without its Queen of 70 years, the beginning of a new era.
The country's first look at King Charles, travelling to London this morning to assume his duties.
This is the last public picture of her at the home where she died, her beloved Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The Queen smiling, appointing Britain's new Prime Minister just days before her death, determined to do her duty, her final act in a lifetime of service. Her children, son Charles, now King Charles, racing to be by her side. Grandson William, now next in line to the throne, driving his uncles, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, to say their last goodbyes. Prince Harry, appearing distraught, arriving just after his grandmother's death was announced. The royals' grief private, while in public, on royal gates, a simple proclamation. Queen Elizabeth II died peacefully, and as flags across the country were lowered, a rainbow magically rising above Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. Crowds spontaneously singing the national anthem.
She's a person we've always looked up to. Somehow, it's just a sad day. Just a very, very sad day.
Queen Elizabeth, so much more than Britain's longest-serving monarch. A global icon.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Diplomat and, quite simply, a steady presence in people's lives. Born in 1926, the third grandchild of King George V, for 7 decades, Elizabeth would guide the nation and its monarchy through historic challenges.
My lords, pray be seated.
Just this year, her Platinum Jubilee celebrated with a military parade. Joined by 3 future kings, Charles, William and George. Today, King Charles will lead his country in mourning.
His sons, William and Harry, united in grief. Harry travelling back to London this morning. The loss of their much-loved grandmother, bringing them together. And King Charles will lead the country in mourning as the Queen's body lies in state. I think you can expect long lines of folks wanting to pay tribute to her themselves. And of course, that state funeral planned with leaders flying in from around the world. Back to you.
All right, Keir Simmons, thank you so much.
And we're staying on top of the latest on the Queen's death all morning.
Yeah, but we're also going to get you just a little bit of some other major headlines here at home, including a new turn in the investigation into the documents found at Mar-a-Lago and more legal trouble for former Trump advisor Steve Bannon. Morning News Now is back in just a few minutes. You're looking at a live picture here of King Charles III, his plane landing just outside London at a Royal Air Force base. We are expecting to hear from him again later on today, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. in the UK. And we will show you if we see him emerge from this plane or head towards Buckingham Palace at any point today. But there's King Charles landing just outside London.
And we'll continue to cover the death of Queen Elizabeth in just a moment. But first, we want to bring you other stories we're following this morning. The Department of Justice announced it will appeal a federal judge's ruling to appoint a special master to review documents from President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. The agency claims an internal team already reviewed the documents, and any further investigation could be a threat to national security. The department also asked the Florida judge to temporarily put aside an order that blocks agents from using the seized documents for criminal investigation purposes. More than 10,000 government files were found when the DOJ searched Mar-a-Lago last month.
And now Steve Bannon, one of former President Trump's advisors, has pleaded not guilty to charges in New York of allegedly defrauding donors who gave money to build a wall at the southern border.
That's right. And it comes 2 years after he was indicted by a federal grand jury in a separate investigation into the charity.
NBC News legal contributor Danny Savalos joins us now. Danny, always great to have you here on set with us. So Bannon was arraigned on 6-count indictment. Let's run down the charges he's facing. What kind of jail time do they carry, and what do you see playing out here?
Basically, all of these counts relate to a conspiracy and a scheme to defraud. It's really just a classic take on the somebody starts a charity, they get the charity, all the funds are supposed to go to a certain place. And by the way, there are rules about charities. You can't just start a GoFundMe and say, oh, I promise, cross my heart, right, I will give this money to people and then start taking a salary. But the indictment alleges essentially that these folks promised, and I include Bannon and a number of unindicted co-conspirators. What that means is that the government, in this case the state of New York, has identified people that they think did bad things, but they're not charging them. What that tells us is those people are probably cooperating and giving evidence. So the interesting thing here, and when you read the indictment, there is a lot about all these unindicted co-conspirators. And I would say comparatively little mention of Bannon, given that he's one of the defendants. So I wonder if going to trial, the defense will basically be, look, right here in the indictment are all these other unindicted people who did most of the bad things. The government here can't prove that it was Bannon who was directly involved in the scheme to defraud or the defrauding itself, the underlying defrauding.
And Danny, in some ways, charges were expected. So are there any surprises here?
Not really, because in a sense, this piggybacks off of his earlier federal charges, the ones that he was pardoned for by President Trump before it ever went to trial. Now, there isn't any what we call constitutional double jeopardy. In other words, the case never went to trial and he was pardoned. So therefore, the federal government's pardon doesn't affect the state's ability to charge him for similar, although not identical because they're not federal crimes, but similar charges based on a lot of the same conduct.
Now, is a plea deal a possibility here?
Steve Bannon? Absolutely not. He's already signaled. By the way, the only way Steve Bannon pleads guilty in this case is if he runs out of money to pay his lawyers, because he's already started his own campaign. He is what in the criminal defense world you would call a challenging client, because he's going to run the show the way he wants to run the show without recognizing the irony that running the show his way is why he needs a criminal defense attorney in the first place.
A challenging client, is that what you said? Is that an official
Challenging
term?
Is a bit of a euphemism. We use other words in the court hallways. I won't repeat them here.
Danny Savalos, thank you so much.
Show.
As always, we appreciate you being here. We're actually going to pull up some live pictures again. This is King Charles III landing now back just outside of London after flying from an Aberdeen airport. We should see him emerging from this plane soon.
And to discuss more, let's bring in David Dunn on the Queen and the institution of the monarchy. He's a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham. David, good morning. Thanks for being with us. So I want to start on a less discussed but incredibly important perspective on the Queen. There's been criticism of her because of the impact of colonialism and the legacy of the British colonial empire. Many associate her with the dark and painful history of that time. So how involved was the Queen in keeping countries under the British flag, especially in her early years on the throne?
One of the remarkable things about the Queen is over that 70-year span, she has presided over the transition from empire to the Commonwealth. So 18 states that were directly ruled by the Queen have got their independence. And it's a process of independence that has been gradual. It hasn't been without its violence in Kenya and other places, but it's been a process of evolution that has been more peaceful and more democratic and stayed together as a community through the Commonwealth, much more so than many other former colonial powers. Take, for example, France or Russia in terms of its former colonial powers countries. So it's a process that the Queen was head of state during, but actually one of the benefits of constitutional monarchy is that actually it's individual prime ministers who are responsible for the policies and responsible for the any blame or associated bad events that happen with them, unless, of course, you're ideologically opposed to the British state from an a priori position, first of all.
Important context and important conversation to be having. Right now on your screen, by the way, you are seeing King Charles as well as the Queen Consort exit this plane. Again, they're just outside London right now, getting into a vehicle where we will see them head out, presumably see them emerge again, and then later on we will hear again from King Charles for the first time as King Charles. This is them and their team exiting from the airplane that just came from Scotland. We'll keep these live pictures up. But I also want to talk about something we just heard with Molly Hunter, some of these troubles that the Queen faced, even just within the royal family, but of course, things within the royal family that were very public, that the whole world knew about. The death, of course, of Princess Diana, sexual abuse allegations against Prince Andrew. How have those moments impacted the monarchy?
Sorry, you're asking me that question. Sorry,
yes, I am. I'm so sorry. I know it's confusing when these images are up. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I mean the most rocky moment for the monarchy was the divorce of Diana and Prince Charles, and then the subsequent divorce and death of her, and the way in which she reacted. The public opinion at the time suggested that actually she wasn't showing enough remorse, so she quickly changed tune and visited the flowers outside Buckingham Palace. She described that period as a difficult one, but that was 20-odd years ago, and things have moved on. The various jubilees, the diamond and gold and platinum jubilees, were periods of whereby the monarchy rehabilitated itself, and her place in the nation's affections has been now unassailable.
Yeah, absolutely. Also a great point there. Way to bring it around. Professor David Dunn, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, your expertise this morning.
Yes, and coming up, our coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth continues. Members of the royal family are heading back to London this morning.
Yeah, that includes Prince William, who's now heir to the throne. The changes we could see from William and his wife, Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge. Up next. Welcome back. With the Queen's death, the entire line of succession for the monarchy has taken a leap forward.
That's right. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk joins us now with more on that shift. Stephanie, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to see you both. You know, the succession to King Charles is now Prince William and then his children, George, Charlotte, Louis, and Prince Harry is fifth in line. But, you know, life will change most dramatically for Prince Charles. It's also going to change for William. He has a new title, so does Kate Middleton, and they have new responsibilities.
On Wednesday, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge brought their children to the first day of school, George, Charlotte, and Louis. By Thursday afternoon, the couple would have new titles and new roles, their royal lives very different. William and Kate are now the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall and Cambridge, and Prince William is the heir to the throne. He takes over as the Duke of Cornwall from his father, a role traditionally held by the eldest son of the reigning British monarch. It comes with an estate that includes more than 130,000 acres of land, worth over $1 billion. As Duke, Charles used the money it generated at least in part to fund his charities. In a 2019 ITV documentary, Prince Charles Inside the Duchy of Cornwall, Prince William recognizing the significance of his future role.
Rest assured, I'm not going to rock the boat. I'll do much the same as what my father's doing.
King Charles may also give William the title Prince of Wales, making Kate the Princess of Wales, the same title held by William's mother, the late Princess Diana.
You're going to be a brilliant princess as well.
Earlier this year, the couple moved to a new royal residence, Adelaide Cottage in Windsor, outside of London. At the time, the palace noting they would be taking on far more senior roles in the royal family, something that had already begun as the Queen stepped back from royal engagements. For the Platinum Jubilee, William and Kate made a controversial trip to Commonwealth nations in the Caribbean, many of those countries considering severing ties with the monarchy altogether over its colonial past. William addressed the issue in a closely watched speech, navigating one of the thorniest issues facing the monarchy.
We support with pride and respect your decisions about your future. Relationships evolve, friendship endures.
During the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebration in London, this moment on the balcony now even more poignant, the succession to her throne at her sides, a public showing that the future of the monarchy was now in her son and her grandson's hands.
I was there that day and got to see that balcony moment. And you know, it goes without saying that so much of what the palace does is very carefully orchestrated. That moment in particular. People have been preparing for the Queen's death, and that was a part of the preparation, just that simple at the end there.
And Steph, just quickly, we're going to get news of if Kate Middleton's getting that title, Princess of Wales. It has not been decided?
Yes. The King is able to make that decision himself. It's not an automatic thing that happens because of precedent. So most likely that will be what happens. And Kate has addressed it before, talked about kind of the significance of that and the responsibility of taking on that role.
Oh, absolutely. All right, Stephanie Goss, thanks so much. Great to have you here on set. And we've got some live pictures actually right now. It's the aerials of the convoy of King Charles as well as Queen Consort heading from that Air Force base just outside of London and headed in towards the city. And coming up, we'll have more on the Queen's influence on culture. It goes much beyond the British border.
That's right. We'll take a look at her influence on the entertainment world and Hollywood's reaction to her death next. Welcome back. Now, let's take a look at the future of the monarchy under King Charles III with Simon Perry. He's the chief correspondent of People magazine, which has two special commemorative covers this week showing the Queen near the beginning and end of her reign.
Oh, I just love seeing those pictures side by side. So cool to do both of them. Simon, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us to talk about this and share those covers. So just first, what are the first changes that we think we could see Charles, now King Charles, make, and what do we expect of him as king?
Well, it's a good question this morning. I've just been seeing some pictures, actually, of him heading back from Balmoral. He's driving through the edge of London off to the centre of London, which puts him right at the heart of the nation. And for the first time, people will start having to get used to the idea and the visuals of the new king right in the heart of the city, of the capital city of the UK, of course. He'll have many plans. He's a very well-travelled man. He's very dug in the different diverse communities of the UK, and he's made a big play on different religions and creeds that are important in Britain as well, not just all about the Christian or the Anglican faith, which was represented so much by his mother, of course. So there are subtle things that will change over time, but I think in the short term, Prince of Wales, as he was now King Charles, will be, we move slowly in Britain in terms of change, and I think it'll be a gradual change where he's concerned.
And Simon, I hear you say you move slowly in Britain. How has public view of the king changed since the death of Diana? Has it been a slow change? Has there been any?
Well, there has been a change. He was deeply unpopular at the time of the passing of Princess Diana 25 years ago. But things have gradually moved. The needle's gradually moved. There are times that his popularity dips, especially around his first wife and the stories around that, and possibly around anniversaries of her passing. But he's been married now for 17 years to Camilla, who was, of course, the other person in that marriage, as Diana put it. So 17 years is a long time, and a lot of people have grown accustomed to them as a couple, and also to her as a public figure. To say that they would be as popular as Queen Elizabeth, who's just passed away, that would be wrong. But at the same time, I think things are changing subtly, and I think a lot of love and support and the grief of the nation will sort of transfer onto him anyway, I think, over the coming days.
Absolutely. I want to ask you more about Camilla in just a moment, but I do just want to point out these are those live pictures that you mentioned of King Charles, also Queen Consort Camilla, who we'll get to in just a moment, headed towards the center of London right now from an Air Force base just outside the city. I have to say, personally, it's kind of remarkable for me to be watching the new king just driving past what looks like normal afternoon traffic. You wonder if any of those people realize what's happening right next to them on this highway. Simon, now I do want to ask you, like I said, about Camilla. I mean, let's talk about the title, Queen Consort, how it comes to be, if it was a decision, if it's automatic, and what that means her role will now be. And in light of, you know, shall we say, some of the controversy in the past, how we plan to see her received? Well,
it's a good question. It hasn't happened for years, of course. The other consort in recent past has been Prince Philip. I'm sure she said as much, in fact. She will copy his role of being a step or two behind the monarch, and very much a supporter and a supportive figure. I think people seeing those pictures of her going through Britain, through London just now with the King, will be surprised to see them passing in those streets. Like you say, I just noticed as well the royal standard is flying on the car. It's something that obviously I've only ever associated with the Queen until literally this morning, and everyone will be saying that things like that. There's just subtle changes that normally there'd be the Queen in that car. But that's Queen Consort. It was something that needs to be cleared up. Charles clearly wanted her to be known as Queen, as an honour, as a rightful place alongside him. And he had a kind of a campaign, I suppose, behind the scenes on that. And the Queen made that proclamation back in February that it was her wish that would be the title chosen. And of course, that's what's happened. And I think with the Queen saying that then, ordinary people have largely swung behind it.
Simon, that just gave me chills when you just mentioned that about the car. It is interesting, those things that we'll see kind of unroll here. All right, Simon, we appreciate your time. Very much needed your perspective this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, so much has been said about the Queen's presence, of course, on the world stage, but behind all the pomp and ceremony was a less formal, even lighthearted Queen.
That's right. Today's show anchor Chanel Jones has a look at the Queen's influence on pop culture.
Her royal image became iconic during her 70-year reign. Queen Elizabeth II, dressed in eye-catching colors and her signature pearls, always accessorized with that top-handle handbag in the crook of her arm. It's no wonder Her Highness has inspired everything from street art to pop art, T-shirts to coffee mugs, and of course, TV and movies.
The Queen has been depicted in popular culture more than any other person, really, because she is a global icon.
Countless stars across the globe themselves starstruck by her presence, including Hollywood royalty Meryl Streep, fashion icon Anna Wintour, and pop star Lady Gaga. But it's the world of fiction that truly had a ball with the Queen's likeness.
Arise, Sir Austin Powers.
She's been portrayed on film and imagined in animation.
Gentlemen, do not steal Lady
Princess crowns!
And, of course, spoofed in sketches.
I want to get away from you. No, you can't get away from me because I'm on the money, ain't I? I'm on the money, and you're on it.
Prince Harry speaking with Hoda earlier this year about his grandmother's unwavering ability to laugh.
What's the best thing about her?
To be honest with you, it's her sense of humour and her ability to see the humour in so many different things.
While only a select few had a chance to see the lighter side of the late monarch, millions have wondered what went on behind palace walls. The drama played up on the silver screen with an Oscar-winning performance by Helen Mirren in The Queen.
As a matter of fact, is how I think best on my feet. You know, I've never been one for sitting around endlessly.
In 2016, Netflix's The Crown helped spark a renaissance of royal fascination.
It's not as easy as it looks.
But beyond the dozens of depictions, nothing came close to the real deal. Those rare features of the true Queen never failed to steal the show.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
From her grand entrance with James Bond at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in London to a tour of the Game of Thrones set where she could view but not sit on the Iron Throne.
And we kept getting told the same thing, which is she's not allowed to sit on other thrones, fictional or otherwise.
The iconic Queen and all of her glory, leaving an impact on pop culture that will continue to carry on.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.